Okay, the recording has started. Welcome to the January 6th edition of the study hall. Two agenda items for today. The first is a neat little trick for finding main ideas. What we're going to do here is we're going to build on our previous knowledge of how to do main idea problems. So, previous knowledge of main idea problems. We will review that knowledge if any of you have not seen the previous session where we talked about main ideas, but new trick. And then if time permits, which it probably will, then we're going to do some number line problems in data sufficiency. As usual, we got to start out with the warnings, so let's just do that real quick. Got to give you the warnings for the same reason the airline people have to give you all the safety information before you take off. Some people still violating these submission rules, so be very careful. You're getting better as a group, but some people are still submitting topics in violation of these rules. Don't submit problems that are too general. In the past couple of weeks, one person submitted, like, how do I do tough critical reasoning? Which is, you know, that's all of critical reasoning. It's not a reasonable scope of a study hall topic. They can't be too specific. Don't ask about two choices in one problem. That's why we have forums. If you have questions that are that particular, please post them to the forum. Lately, we've been answering forum questions with a 1 or 2 day turnaround because we haven't had as much traffic, so we've been able to answer everything very quickly. So post these things in the forum, please. Also, personal issues, if you have a score, study plan, thing like that, it's you in particular, here's my scores, here's my plan, doesn't belong in the study hall, belongs in the forum, on the general folder. So, okay. If it's an admissions question, we have a separate folder called Ask an Admissions Consultant that's run by the MBA admission firm with whom we partner. They're an admissions consulting firm. They will take those questions. There's a folder where you can ask admissions-related questions. The kind of stuff that we do want to see, we want to see intermediate depth, meaning not this general, but general enough to make a lesson out of. This is a good one. Statistics questions involving the median. That's particular enough, but not so particular that it's like one question. If you include one question, please tie it into a more general issue. So I can't decide between C and D on this question. Could you present some, you know, blah, 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 general question? Biggest thing, no OG problems. That really, that's not a joke, guys. No OG problems. We can't do them. About 20 or 30% of the submissions this last period were OG problems. Please do not submit those. We will ignore them because we have to. It's copyright issues where we're not allowed to use paid printed material online here. So we use OG problems in our 9-session course, but that's because all of our 9-session course students have bought the book, so it's fair use. The study hall is open to everyone, so we can't use OG because we don't know if people own the OG or not. Unfortunately, that's the rules. Okay, questions, smiley face if you understand the rules. Okay, here's the examples again from before. You've seen these in previous sessions. Also, please check the archives. The archives are very big. At this point, the archives contain almost 30 topics. So if you are submitting something, take a look through the archives, see if you see it in there before you submit it, because there's a lot of stuff that we've already covered, and I'm going to try not to, please don't move things around. Okay. I'm going to try not to repeat topics because I want to make sure that each study hall is new and different. So, okay. Again, bad submissions. Here's the usual collections of bad submissions. These are all really specific questions with no tie-ins to any sort of general topic. These things belong on the forum. Not belonging here. These are examples of questions that are way too general. There's nothing that we can do with this. I mean, We can't talk about all of critical reasoning in one session. We cannot explain everything the OG does not explain. These are not reasonable requests. Personal study plans or advice, these have a place. That place is the general folder. The place is not here. And then finally, no official guide. We will ignore them. Okay, smiley face if you guys are okay with these rules. Here's the basic rules. Any questions, please type them in the text box, and then we will get started. Okay, good. Let's take a look. So, story time. Sort of story time. I'll try to keep it streamlined so that it's relevant here. But I was in a waiting room at one time, and I happened upon a journal of a very highly technical field that honestly the journal was so technical that I had no idea what any of it was talking about. So I encountered a journal about a highly technical field. Some field of, say engineering of something, electrical something or other. So, and I am not a tech person, so I didn't understand anything written in it. But I'm curious. I picked it up anyway. I picked it up and scanned the articles. It involved some sort of, cryptographic protection of something or other. And in the articles, I couldn't understand any of the specifics that they were talking about. Nothing. I mean, they use a lot of abbreviations that I didn't understand, lots of technical terms that I didn't understand. Basically, it might as well have been written in another language. But what do you guys think that I still understood about the article? Go ahead and type answers in the text box. Like, remember specifics, couldn't understand them. So, what do you guys think would still be understandable about this article? Okay, I bet it was a technical article. Definitely, I could understand. Sure, I mean, right, but that's not really understanding. Aha. Okay, yeah, you guys are starting to zoom in on it. Flow of the argument. Sudanshu says flow of the argument. A couple of you guys are saying topic sentences and so on and so on. That's the idea. Like, the point here is, even though I literally did not understand a word of the technical language in the journal, even though I couldn't understand the technical language at all, I could still understand the following. I could still understand transition words. By transition words, I mean such things as therefore, or even though, or despite, or in addition, etc. So those are words that indicate the logical flow of the passage. And then I could also understand anything placing these things in context. So general statements of context. So I could understand something like, until 1997, it was not possible to blah, 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 blah. Recently, this assumption has been called into question by, etc. These things I could totally still understand. I mean, the specifics that followed them were garbage as far as I was concerned. Like, literally, I do not understand a word of this stuff. But as far as the transition words and things like that go, perfectly understandable. And what I found was these things alone are good enough to detect the primary purpose or main idea of the passage. Like, even if you don't understand anything that's going on in the specifics, you can still look at the transition words in the passage, and you can look at general statements of context that are not specific, and I found that this was plenty good enough. And so what we're going to do here in today's study hall is we're going to apply this insight to some RC passages from GMAT Crack, and we'll see how that pans out. So, like, as an example, I don't remember exactly what was going on with these articles because I'm not really a memory person, but for instance, if you see something like, you know, historically, some people that I don't know have used something to do something. However, this tradition has had to be revised in light of some specific that I don't understand, which has done something that I don't understand. Okay, even the X's are specific. So the X's might be, you know, like, historically, lawyers have had to use this obscure law that we don't know in order to do something in court. Or engineers have had to use these components to do this something. Someone has had to use something to do something up until now. However, because of some new development, if it was court, there might be new legislation or new public policy, who knows. If it was engineering, there might be a new invention. They have to do something else. So basically, you can tell the main point here is the old way of doing something isn't good enough anymore, etc. This is the point. I mean, you can definitely do this and figure out the kind of context that a passage is operating in. It's going to be very abstract. I mean, you're going to have a lot of some things flying around. So you have to be okay with this sort of degree of abstraction. But when you're talking about primary purpose or main idea, that you don't have to go past the level of abstraction. That's what I'm trying to say. So we're going to make this a little bit more concrete, we are going to apply this to some actual passages from GPrep and see how that flies. Any questions on what's going on this slide? Does everybody understand what I mean when I say transition words, and does everybody understand what I mean when I say general statements of context? Smiley face if you do. If you have a question, go ahead and throw it in the text box. Jason, you got something in your text box. I don't know if you mean to. Okay, and you've had it for a while, which is what I'm saying. Okay, now let's do some quick review. Who remembers what's the basic protocol for answering main idea questions? Who knows? Go ahead and type in the text box. Basic technique for answering main idea questions. It's good. You guys are starting to say it. When you get a main idea question, this is what we've covered in previous sessions. For main idea questions, the best way to operate is to cover up the answer choices, predict the answer without looking at the choices, then reveal the choices, and then check to see which one is closest to your own version. If you are interested, the rationale for this is in one of the other study hall sessions. The reason why this is the most efficient protocol is in the session dated. The session is dated August 19th, 2010. So see the August 19th, 2010 study hall lab for the justification. If you're interested in the justification for this principle, that's where you're going to get it. Okay, so make sure you don't forget this. So in light of this fact, here's what we're going to do today. We got 3 passages. Here's what we're going to do today. Okay, we have 3 GMAT Crack passages. For each one, for the first one, I'm going to walk you through this process. For each passage, we're going to black out, we're just going to erase the specifics and read only the transition words and general context. We're going to predict the answer, and then answer choices will be shown on the next slide. So let's do this. Smiley face if you're ready to try it. If you have any questions, toss them in the text box. Otherwise, we will get cracking. It's good stuff. Okay. Here's a GMAT Crack passage. Let's look at it. And let's literally black out everything that is a specific. It seems kind of extreme, but let's black out everything that is a specific, i.e. just ignore it completely, and then predict the main idea. Okay, so let me show you, I'll walk you through this one together, and you'll get an idea of what we're doing here. Historians have identified 2 dominant currents in the Russian women's movement of the late Tsar. Okay, the Russian women's movement of the late Tsarist period, that's a specific, we don't care. Okay, bourgeois feminism, blah, 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 blah. This is, you know, specifics, we don't care. Blah, 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 blah. The only thing in here that we do care about is there's a transition word in here. Does anybody see it? By contrast. So rather, well, class rather than gender is a specific, but by contrast is, you know, you're contrasting these 2 currents. The other stuff, blah, 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 I don't care. It's all specific. So, wow, look at all that. Historians have identified 2 dominant currents in the blah, 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 I don't care. This, by contrast, that. So, okay, what have we figured out? Let's move this out. So the main point, I mean, notice how really easy it is to figure out the main point of this paragraph once you figure this out. So if you've got, like, the point of this paragraph is 2 contrasting approaches to something. So there you go. We don't know what the something is, but fine. However, despite antagonism, blah, 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 the 2 movements shared certain underlying beliefs. Both regarded something, okay, that's specifics, but both of them is not a specific, that's a connector. Blah, 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 workplace, emancipation, self-sufficiency, those are all specifics that we don't really care about. Both groups also recognize blah, 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 blah that we don't care about. In fact, in fact, this means you're going to have an example. So examples are specifics. So although the intense hostility made it difficult for them to recognize these areas of agreement. Finally, blah, 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 concurred. Concurred means agreement in something. How about that? So we just killed like probably 85% of the passage. Let's take a look at what we got here. However, despite antagonism, the two movements shared certain underlying beliefs. Both of them did something. Both of them recognized something, although there was hostility that got in the way. Finally, they concurred in something else. So in the text box, guys, what is definitely the point of this paragraph? Yeah, so notice how you guys are just nailing this now because we just killed all the specifics that are like distractions all the time. The point is, but they actually had a lot in common. And that's it. So what we've just distilled this down to is the essence of the passage. So the essence of this passage is the combination of these two very succinct main ideas, which is, to show that two contrasting approaches to something actually have stuff in common. Okay, does anybody disagree with this? So like the main purpose of the passage, the stuff that's in red, does anybody feel that that's inaccurate, or does anybody want to add anything to that or change the emphasis, or is everybody good? Smiley face if you're good. If you have any suggested changes, go ahead and throw them into the into the text box. Smiley face if you're good. Okay, so that's our prediction. If we see what is the main idea, this is our prediction for primary purpose. All right, let's do it. Turn the page. It'll ask us about primary purpose. We need something like that. So what I'll do is I'll give you polling tools. Let's see. Okay, you should see polling tools over there in the corner, and then okay, here are the choices. Please don't answer this in the text box. Please answer this using these things. You should see something that looks like that in the corner of your Illuminate screen. Please use these buttons to pick an answer to the question. Your answer will not be visible to the rest of the class. Okay. All right, everybody pick something. We've still got Grov, GVG, RP, and Shub without answers indicated. So please pick something. Again, the buttons for you to press are over there. They're in the same area as the smiley face. They look like that. Okay. All right, very good. Here's your statistics. There's like one or two of you still not answering, but the correct answer is A. Let's talk about the non-responses include me, so there's not a whole lot of those, but okay. Correct answer is A. The reason why it's not C is because the main point is not contrasting. Like what they do is they introduce that there are two contrasting approaches, but then they spend the bulk of the passage pointing out specific commonalities between these. So despite antagonism, the two movements shared underlying beliefs. They both did this, they both did this, they concurred in this. This is the majority of the passage. So if you say that the point was to contrast the two approaches, then you're missing that huge, huge emphasis. So, but the point is to identify the points of agreement between. Yeah, one gentleman is making the point. You got to answer the question. I know I make this point on the regular, but there were 3 of you who didn't pick an answer, so you got to pick something. All right, so if you put contrasting, not the point. I mean, the bulk of the passage was dedicated to pointing out commonalities. It did mention that they were, initially contrasting approaches, but this is incorrect because the bulk of the passage is dedicated to similarities. And again, if you break through the specifics and figure this out, you can get that. So this is it. As far as the other points go, nobody picked them, but just to make sure you understand. Advocating, nothing is advocated. This passage is purely analysis. It doesn't, advocate means you take a side, which this passage doesn't. More radical, no. I mean, it's not in there. And then criticizing historians for overlooking them, no. Like, if it was to point out similarities, this would be correct, but criticizing historians, not so much. Okay. A political. Yeah, actually, that's a good point that Gaurav is making also. This is also a problem because there's not really a problem to solve in this passage. It's a good point. So also there isn't really a problem here. There's just two opposing or like two different schools of thought. But if it were a problem, there would have to be a very specific issue that has to be resolved, which in this case there isn't one. Okay, so it's very well done. Most of you got this right. Granted, we walked you through it together and stuff, but I think you guys can see the power of approaching it like this. Now, obviously you can't literally black things out when you take the test because it'll be on the screen, but when you do this, when you get a main idea question, and even when you read the passage in general, this is also a fast way to read passages. Like if any of you have really, really ridiculous hard time with keeping it, with staying on schedule when you read these things, it's a bit extreme. So although a bit extreme, this is also a very time-efficient way to read through the passages. If you are a very, very detail-oriented person, a lot of people who post in our forums are probably naturally detail-oriented, but probably even more so because they're in professions like engineering, which are all about details. If you're a very detail-oriented person, you may want to take an approach this extreme just for a little shock therapy, like just to get you to think in a way that's totally different. Because if your modus operandi is usually your MO is usually to just look at a bunch of details and try to memorize them, you can't do that on this task. That's not a good way to read passages. So this method, because it basically skips all of the details entirely, is a nice way of getting around that issue. So there's a question in the text box about general. Maybe. I mean, one person says the more general main ideas are usually correct. Yeah, maybe, although these first three are all kind of the same degree of generality. Like, these are more specific, so you may have a point there. I don't want to say for sure until I can do a little more research on that. But generally, they will usually express these main ideas in pretty general language. Okay, smiley face if you appreciate how this works and you're willing to try it on your own now on another passage. Again, it's quite extreme. I mean, this will push a lot of you guys out of your comfort zone. It's like, whoa, I'm not reading any details at all. But it's good stuff. So let's give this a shot on an upcoming passage. I notice a couple of you are typing questions. So Garth and Jason, you have text in your text boxes. If those are questions, I'll wait for them. If not, just make sure to clear out the text box. Okay. Answer for the, well, okay, Garth says the answer mostly comes from the second paragraph. Well, that's because the second paragraph is bigger. I mean, it's the bulk of the passage. So it's not that it's the second paragraph, it's that it's most of what is there. So that's the point. Like, this is a short intro, and this is most of what is happening here. All right, let's do this for another passage. Here's a passage. Try it yourself. Oh, yeah, you can. It's not really that different. So, I'm using short ones because they fit on the screen. Okay. So, when you do this, I'll give you 3 minutes. Ignore the details. Pretend you're blacking them out. And predict a main idea. And then I'll show you the answer choices in 3 minutes. Okay, here's a stopwatch. There you go. 3 minutes. You probably won't need 3 minutes with this approach, but because I love you, you have 3 minutes anyway. Go for it. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, does anybody need more time to come up with a main idea prediction? Because I'm going to black this and put the choices up there. If anybody needs more time, go ahead and say so in the text box. Otherwise, I'm going to show you the answers. Okay, here are the answer choices. Go ahead and, again, please indicate your answer with the buttons that are shown. So the buttons are on the left. It'll take about 30 seconds to do that if necessary. Okay, everybody take another few seconds if necessary. Please indicate an answer. If you have to guess, and then I will throw the statistics up on the screen in a moment. Okay, looks like everybody's got an answer. So here are the statistics. So clear favorite is B. You all answered this time. The one that's listed as no answer is me. So that's good. Correct answer is B. Let's go ahead and look at this and figure out why. So 12 out of 19 is not bad. Let's do our little method on the passage itself and figure out what's going on here. So, okay, here's the passage. Prior to 1965, geologists assumed that something, so there's an assumption. By the way, you guys know how these work. When they say prior to some year they assumed something, you know that means that assumption is going to be proven wrong, or something, because otherwise they wouldn't qualify it like that if it were still the assumption now. But in 1965, somebody found that some stuff were not something as had been expected. Some geologists wondered whether blah, 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 blah actually could be explained by, we should keep that. So whether, I don't know what that means, could be explained by, I don't know what that means. Geologists' pre-1965 assumptions about I don't care had been based on I don't care, but blah, 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 blah. Okay. So let's talk about what's going on in this paragraph. We've got old assumption, but you have someone found results that were surprising, someone found unexpected results that violated this assumption. And then people were guessing how this might happen. Okay. In 1992, he tested blah, 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 blah. We don't care. He found that we don't care about that. It produces much friction, blah, 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 blah. That's all specifics. And then geologists therefore wondered whether something. So it's all still, I mean, you got some sort of relevant results. I mean, presumably having to do with the surprising results in the first paragraph. Because if they didn't have anything to do with that, then it would be like an incredibly disconnected passage. Like you can assume that the passage will have a logical flow. Like if these results were not related to this, it would be incredibly stupid. So you can assume that they are related to that. And then more hypotheses, more guessing about how to explain the results. One person writes, I wrote down geologists assumed X but X. Make sure you know what geologists assumed X but X means, though, because like that's still a very you know, that's not the point. The point is that something happened that violated expectations. So you should actually make that explicit. You know, if you just write geologists assumed X but X, not as clear. Like, you should be like, definitely the point is the assumptions were wrong. So, unexpected results, and then people tried to explain them. So the point is going to have something to do with trying to explain unexpected results. Trying to explain unexpected or surprising scientific findings. All right, trying to explain unexpected or surprising scientific findings. That is almost exactly what this says. So, there you go. The other answer choices, everybody picked them at least once, so let's look at them. Evaluating a method used to test a hypothesis. The problem is that that doesn't happen. Like, they do discuss some sort of methods, but nothing is evaluated here at all. The passage is just full of people guessing why certain things are happening. So nothing is evaluated. Examining the assumptions underlying a particular experiment. Well, okay, that might be why Byerly did this experiment, but it's not the main point. Like, the main point is this, but this, then this. Like they spend the majority of the passage talking about possible explanations of this result. They don't actually spell out the assumptions at all behind the experiment. I mean, experiments are discussed, but only in the context of the larger surprising result that we're talking about here. So only in the context of how they relate to results in the first paragraph. Questioning the validity of a scientific finding? Absolutely not. The validity is not questioned at all. Like, they found that this was, your scientific finding is that, right there. In 1965, somebody found that something was not as expected. That is not questioned at all in this passage. The passage finds a bunch of possible ways to explain that. Like, this might be true because of this, it might be true because of that. But the validity of that is never questioned. Like, these words would mean that they actually said these findings might be wrong. So, absolutely not. The passage treats the findings as fact and seeks to explain them. There is nothing to suggest that the findings might be wrong, which is what that would mean. And then presenting evidence to support hypotheses, not really. I mean, if you look at this, they end the passage with, they wondered this and they wondered that. So, and your recent hypothesis is what they close the passage with. Recent scientific hypothesis. First of all, this would be a very bad main idea because it doesn't even happen until way down here. You will not have a main idea that starts 4 lines from the bottom of the passage. So if that's what you have, you ought to think twice about that. But also that they don't explain that. They don't present any evidence at all. They're just like, oh, here's the hypothesis, and then we're done. They wondered this. No evidence to support it or to refute it. So, 2 things wrong there. First, not discussed until the very end of the passage. plus there's no evidence. It's just they wondered, and then it ends. Okay. Any questions about this passage? I think you can see the power of this method. I mean, even if we're doing nothing and read no specifics at all, we still have plenty of evidence by which we can figure this out. Trying to explain unexpected or surprising findings. Look at that, trying to explain unexpected or surprising findings. Any questions, go ahead and toss them in the text box, please. Otherwise, give me a smiley face and we'll move on. Okay, nobody is typing, so we're going to try this again. Same thing we tried here. Ignore the details, predict the main idea, and after 3 minutes, I will show you the answer choices. Here's your new passage. Same directions. Black out the details in your head. Okay, here's a 3-minute timer. Go for it. Okay, if anybody needs more time, please indicate in the text box that you need more time. Otherwise, I will show you the answer choices. Okay, looks like nobody needs more time. Here are your answer choices. Please indicate your answer with the buttons. Same thing. Please use those buttons to indicate your answer. Give you about 30 seconds. Okay, there are 3 of you that still need an answer. Those are Dinesh, GBG, and just those 2. Please indicate answers. Okay, we're waiting on Dinesh. All right, here's your statistics. There you go. Again, as usual, the one that's listed as no response is me. So overwhelmingly correct. Again, the correct answer is B. It's a tough one, but notice it's a very powerful tool that we've got here. So you guys, again, about 2/3 of you are correct. It's a very difficult passage, but you did well as a group. I mean, you know, this passage is obnoxious. Like, I mean, this may be a passage where you quite literally don't understand anything in it. But as far as the main idea goes, it doesn't matter. It's still fine. So let's take a look. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, difficulty level is not something that you can use in your studying process. So not a relevant question. Okay. Let's do it. Is it possible to blah, 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 blah? We don't care. Is it possible to do something? Question mark. The orthodox answer is no. Whether they support something or something else, whether they support this or that, most economists agree that something are necessary. They point out that something, blah, 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 blah. Nevertheless, some government's policymakers insist that blah, 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 blah. Unfortunately, because this approach fails to deal with something happens There you go. All right. Most of it's gone. Is it possible to do something? The orthodox answer is no. So that is, there's a question. And the orthodox means, orthodox is a very important word in this passage. If you don't understand what that word means, you're going to have a little bit of difficulty here. But you can kind of figure it out from context. Like if you don't know what orthodox means, the context clues here are fairly strong. But orthodox means like the standard answer. So the standard or accepted answer is given. And most economists agree with that standard answer, regardless of which of these two things they believe. And here's why. Because that's the evidence part. They point out that blah, 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 blah. Nevertheless, some government policymakers insist that. So nevertheless indicates that something must be going against this. So some people have tried to enact policy that contradicts this standard, but it has failed. It fails. Okay. There you go. They give you a question. They give you a standard or accepted answer to the question. They give you the reasons why this is the standard answer. And they talk about why things that have tried to go against the standard answer have failed. So, there you go. So the main point is some combination of those things. So the main point involves giving and explaining standard answer to a question or problem, and then examining the shortcomings of opposition, examining the. So basically those shortcomings of the opposition are just more evidence for the standard position, examining additional support for the standard position. Because they're talking about how opposing positions fail. So if opposing positions fail, then that constitutes support. So all right, it's pretty clear what's going on here. We got a position, and we're basically supporting and examining the position. So that is what that says in almost exact words again. Apply to conventional theories, one person put, doesn't happen. The two conventional theories are the ones that are blacked out here and here, but they don't apply them. In fact, they don't even distinguish between them. Because they're like, whether the economists believe in this theory or this theory, it doesn't matter because they still agree on this point. So the distinction between the two theories is not important at all. Like, the two theories aren't important at all. In fact, the whole point is that the economists agree on the stuff in the passage, regardless of which theory they believe in. So that's bad. Support a controversial policy? No way. Because here's your controversial policy, and they say it fails because it failed to deal with so-and-so. So They introduce a controversial policy, and then they're like, that doesn't work, and here's why it doesn't work. So quite the opposite of what it says here. So passage gives reasons why the controversial policy will fail. Also, again, I'm telling you guys, let me write this down here. If they don't talk about something until the second half of the passage, it is not the main idea. Like, notice the controversial policy doesn't get mentioned until all the way down here. So that's like 60 or 70% of the way through the passage. I mean, you will never, ever, 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 ever have a passage whose main idea is not mentioned until the end. It's not going to happen. It will never happen, I promise you. So just, you can use this as an elimination criterion. You will never have a main idea that is not mentioned until the second half of the passage. They've got to talk about it throughout the passage. That's why it's the main idea. It has to touch on like everything. So if you're picking regions like C, it just means you're picking out one random detail and then putting that as your main idea. Underlying causes of phenomenon, not really. Because it's not a phenomenon. But the problem is about answering a question, not about explaining some phenomenon. So if you look at these remaining transition words, they don't support the idea of explaining some finding. Instead, they support the idea of presenting an answer to a question and supporting it. So this is, there are some phenomena in the passage, but this is not supported by any of the remaining transition and context words. Okay, and then innovative solution, nobody picked that, so we don't need to worry about it. Well, Brian, it's everything. I mean, it's the whole passage. Like, notice this main idea has to do with all of this stuff. It has to do with everything. In this passage, this main idea had to do with everything. Here was your unexpected finding. Here's some explanations. Here's some more explanations. It's the entire passage. In this one, identifying points of agreement between two groups. Here's the two groups. Here's the points of agreement. It's everything. I mean, the main idea should touch on the bulk of the passage. If it's a short passage, it should be quite literally the entire thing. If it's a long passage, there may be little chunks that are not part of the main idea, especially at the end. But it's going to be the whole thing. And if you bury everything as details and just leave these transitions sticking out, it should be very clear what the thrust of the passage is. You know, here's a question. Here's an answer. People agree on it. Here's why. Here was one attempt at opposing it. Here's why it failed. There's your main point. It's there. It's what's left when the details are gone. So, okay. That's it for the reading comp unit. We got 20 minutes left. We can do a couple of number line problems in 20 minutes. But I hope this helps. And if any of you are like super duper detail oriented, you know, I hope this helps. It'll save you time as well. Like this is exactly how I read the passages at first. Like I just don't even bother with details. But that's mostly because of the way my brain processes stuff. I am very much the opposite of a lot of people who post in our forum. Like I am not detail oriented at all, and my head swims whenever I see any details. So like it would just be stupid for me to read a bunch of details because I would not remember any of them. So this is what I do. I just like quite literally ignore everything that is a detail when I read through the passage, and I'm just like, okay, here's what's happening. Yeah. then what that does is, because like when I do this, I can get through the whole passage in like less than 1 minute because I'm not reading anything except for these. So what that does is it gives me all this extra time that I need to look up details. So if I read the passage like this, then I've got like 3 extra minutes to work with that I can use to find detail. So if it takes me 2.5 minutes to hunt down some detail, then I'm fine, because I didn't spend a bunch of time reading the passage. So I can spend as much time as I need to. Because I mean, I'm not detail-oriented. I'm terrible at details. It takes me sometimes 2-3 minutes to find a detail. But if I go through the passage and just read, I mean, I'm only reading like 40 words out of the whole passage. So I have plenty of time to find details. All right, let's, yeah, although, like, okay, I mean, Grish points out, I am making the assumption here that you can tell a detail from a transition word fairly quickly, and a detail from a context word. In my little story time example, like this was, you know, ironically, the more confusing the passage is, the easier it will be to make that distinction. I mean, for example, if these were literally X's, it would be trivial, because anything that would be X's you would ignore, and anything that would not be X's you would pay attention to. So, like, if they were actually X's, it would be the easiest distinction in the world. But I mean, in a passage like this one, let me put the passage on the next page again. I mean, the distinction should be, again, I'm going on a limb here, but the distinction should be fairly clear. Like, you've got, is it possible to, and then suddenly it's mumbo-jumbo economics stuff. So splitting that up into, is it possible to, and blah, 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 probably not that hard. Because, like, is it possible to is not going to confuse you. This stuff will. This is not a specific that is. I mean, you gotta get used to this, but I think given the percents of you guys that are getting these things right, I think you're halfway there already at least. So it's worth a shot. So as a quick summary, let me kill that. If you have any other questions, feel free to throw them up there while we're at it. Okay. As a quick summary of what's going on here. You know, if you use this technique for initial reading of the passage, if you do this, then you should write down your predicted main idea, even if you don't see a main idea question yet. Because if you do, because I mean the point is that when you do this, you will have a prediction that will be very easy to make, and if you might forget it later on. So the deal is that if you encounter a main idea question later on, you can just look at what you wrote. If you use this technique for initial reading, you should be able to read the whole thing in 1 to 2 minutes, because it's not real reading anymore. It's like fake reading you're just looking at. So this will give you a lot of extra time. So it'll give you extra time to look up the details. And then if that's what you need, then you're good to go. So I mean, I could actually see this helping either type of student. If you're a very detail-oriented person, it'll give you more time to hunt for details. So it's like it plays to your strength because it gives you more time to do what you're good at. If you're more of a big picture thinker like me, then it'll give you more time because you you need more time because it's hard to find details. So either way, it's a benefit. Give it a shot. It's worth it. Try it on some of the OG passages and see how it works. All right. Any questions? Throw them in the text box. Otherwise, we will move on. 15 minutes, do a little bit of number line action here. Okay, one person's got text in the box. I'll try to get it on the fly once it appears. Okay, let's talk about problems on the number line. Let me just flip through the ones I've got here and see what is doable in the time that we have. Okay, try your hand at this problem. Switching gears. Try your hand at this. I'll give you maybe a minute 30, a minute 45. Problem's very short, so it shouldn't take that long. And please use the buttons to indicate an answer. Go for it. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we got answers from about 2/3 of you, so please indicate an answer in the next 10 or 15 seconds. Thank you. Okay, there's one of you, I think you just logged in, so that's fine if you don't have an answer. Here's your statistics. Overwhelmingly, people have this correct, so we'll try to make it quick here. So there's your statistics. One gentleman asked in the text box, would this classify as coordinate geometry? I would say no, because coordinate geometry, I would reserve that label for two-dimensional problems, like in the XY plane, because number line problems and coordinate geometry problems really don't have anything to do with each other. Like coordinate geometry problems deal with slopes and intercepts and all this other stuff. On a number line, there's no such thing as a slope or an intercept, because you have to have two dimensions to have those things. So the skill set's totally different. So as such, I wouldn't use the same label. Okay. So the story here is this. If K is to the left of T, is the product to the right of T. That's a good point. Although, well, you'll see. Some of them fall into other categories. But, well, like this one definitely does. But, yeah, all right. Does anybody know what does this mean? Go ahead and type in the text box. Is the product KT to the right of T? What does to the right of mean? Careful, not really. Yeah, it's an inequality. It's not a positive negative thing. To the right of 0 means positive, but nobody's talking about 0 here. So this is let's make some connections and takeaways here. If you see like to the right of, that's the same as just saying it's greater than. And if you see to the left of, it's really the same as saying that it's less than. I mean, these are exact correspondences. So as such, you may be looking at an inequalities problem in disguise. So in this case, that's kind of what's going on. You may be looking at inequalities problems wearing a costume. So this translates to, is KT greater than T? So All right, well, let's see what we can do with that. Also, we're given that k is to the left of t. So given that k is less than t. Okay, what are the ways in which this can happen? Does anybody know what kinds of numbers do we have to think about in particular when we think about such inequalities? So PNZ, positive, negative, 0, very true. And then also fractions. So, right. In such inequalities, you may have to consider the following types of numbers. Positive, negative, 0 pretty much all the time. 3 signs. Remember, there are not 2 signs, there are 3 signs. And you might have to think about fractions. Quote unquote fraction. I mean, any number can be a fraction, really. Like 18 could be a fraction if it's 18 over 1. But when we say fractions, we mean like between 0 and 1. Versus non-fractions. So, okay, so this is actually another connection. If you have to think about these kinds of issues, this is a number properties in disguise. So these things wear a lot of hats here. They can be lots of different kinds of problems without really saying what they are. So let's take a look. Let's put it on the next page and examine it. If a number k is to the left, these problems are from GMAT Crack, by the way, if anybody's wondering. If the number k is to the left of the number t, then it is the product kt to the right of t. So statement 1, let's take a quick look. Most of you got it right, so we will do it quickly. Statement 1, we know that k is less than t, but we also know that t is less than 0. So on the number line, we have 0, we have t, and we have k. This is not a scale diagram, but it have to be in this order at some position. So tell me something about kt. I know that's vague, but you're right. But this product that we're looking at, not about k and t in particular. There you go. KT has to be, well, a lot of you guys are throwing a lot of inequalities at me. KT is positive because k is negative and t is negative, so negative times negative is positive. So this is a PNZ problem, a positive negative 0 problem in disguise. So KT's over there. So that's going to be sufficient because it's positive. Positive is always bigger than negative. So there you go. Statement 2, let's take a look. You know, k is less than 1. So, and k is also less than t. We know that k is less than 1, and also that k is less than t. No idea of the order of t and 1. So here's another very important lesson. On a lot of number line problems, if not even most of them, you're going to have to break stuff down case-wise. So a lot of people who are very big algebra people do not like to break things down case-wise, but you got to break stuff like this down case-wise. You got to break it down into different possibilities. So on many number line problems, you will have to break down the possibilities into cases. So in this case, we don't know if t is bigger than 1 or if t is smaller than 1. And remember that matters, because if t is smaller than 1, it's what we're calling a fraction. But if t is bigger than 1, then it's what we're calling a non-fraction. And those things have different behaviors when you multiply them by stuff. So if you have this type of situation going on, and also we don't know if k is negative or positive. We got all kinds of stuff going on here. So we may even want to maybe 2 more cases. So all right. It's going to take me a second to draw all this stuff. So we don't know if k is positive or negative, and we don't know if t is greater than or less than 1. So we've got ourselves a few cases here. I just realized that I'm making too many marks. We just need k, t, 0, and 1. Okay. One possibility is that k is positive and that t is more than 1. So that would look like this. One possibility is that k is positive and t is less than 1. I'm going to make t capital just because otherwise it tends to blend in with stuff. One possibility is that k is negative and t is less than 1. There's even more possibilities of this, too. One possibility is that k is negative and t is greater than 1. And a fifth possibility is that k and t are both negative. So, and you know, to boot, there's even more possibilities than that, which is the crazy part. Because like you've got all these, you also have all the possibilities where things are. So you've also got this possibility here where k and t are both negative. So k, t, 0, 1. We probably don't have to consider all of this because remember, as soon as we get a contradiction, we're done. But in this case, let's take a look. In this case, you can plug numbers if you need to, but k is a fraction, so kt will be less than t because it's a fraction times t. Fraction times t is going to be less than t. So kt is less than t. That's a no to the question. In this case, k is still a fraction, t is still positive, so same thing. In this case, k is negative, so kt is negative, so kt is less than t. Same thing as here. These are all still no's to the question. But then in this case, kt is positive, so kt is greater than t. So that's a yes. There you go. Insufficient. So the answer to the problem is A. Okay. Let's take a look at the takeaways that we got. 3 different kinds of general lessons we've learned from this guy. The first is that you may have to think about connections to inequalities. The second thing is that you may have to look at connections to number properties. And the third thing, which believe me, you will have to do a lot of on these problems, is you will have to break them down into cases. In fact, I've rarely seen one of these kinds of things in which you don't, which is why they do it with data sufficiency and not problem solving. Like in problem solving, you're not going to have to do case-wise breakdowns because there's no way that you could make a problem solving problem out of that. But yeah, it is a time suck, but it's not horrible. I mean, it's only horrible if you hesitate for a really long time before jumping into it. Like if you know that making case-wise is breakdown is what you have to do here, it's not as bad as you think. So, but yeah, there's a lot of connections here. I mean, they break down into a bunch of different things, but most of them have to do with either number properties or inequalities, which is why we don't give them a category of their own, because they're going to have something to do with one of these things. All right, we are out of time, so what we're going to do is we are going to continue. I have 3 or 4 more of these problems, but we have no more time in today's session. So what we'll do is we'll continue with number line problems in the next edition. So back to Punta del Este here. We started this topic. We'll continue this topic in the January 25th edition. Okay, we are done. If you have any quick administrative questions, go ahead and ask. I'm going to turn off the recording. If there's any questions, we'll take that briefly first. If you have any questions, toss them out there, and we'll get those answered. And otherwise, I will see you in a couple of weeks, and welcome back from vacation. Is there a session next week? No, it's every other week. That's the way we do this. I don't know if you're new, but these are every 2 weeks, except during vacation periods and such. Then they're less often. Okay, and the one in 2 weeks is earlier. It'll be at usually it's 4:30 Pacific, but you should go ahead and check the website in a few days, and I'll have it updated. It's 4:30 Pacific, 7:30 Eastern, and they go back and forth between this kind of time slot and 3 hours earlier. So. Yeah. Okay. All right. Other questions? I'll grab those. Otherwise, we will. I'm gonna kill the recording. Okay, the recording has been